I have a remarkable young lady on this show, Dr. Pamela Gurley. We're going to talk about her book and some other issues impacting Black women in America. Her book is Am Not A Stereotype, I Am Her, H-E-R. That was written in 2019. How mentally taxing it is to be a Black woman in America. Wow. Thank you, Dr. Gurley, for being on the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Let me first say this. Before you came on the show, I just did a segment about how swim caps made for Black women have been banned by the Olympic Committee. Not because they give anyone an unfair advantage, not because it is a distraction for other swimmers, just because they don't understand it, basically. So once again, it just illuminates how cultural norms are biased against Black women in particular, especially in sports like this. But let's talk about your background. Tell me why it's important to highlight the reality of being a Black woman in America.
One, we are the most unrepresented, no matter how successful we are, no matter what we do. It's very difficult. A prime example is the caps. We want to protect our hair and take care of our hair just like we want to take care of our bodies. But we get subpar medical treatment. And if we don't advocate for the things that are important to us, then we kind of fail ourselves. We fail our communities, and we fail the young ladies that are coming up behind us. So I think it's important for us to be vocal and say what it is that we need to be represented and to have fairness and equity. That's my main thing. It's not diversity, it's equity that's very important for us to have. Equity and equality, and they are not the same thing.
I want you to speak on that, sister. I teach a course at the university, a policy course where we illuminate the life of Dr. King. And Dr. King, up until 1964, he was talking about equality. After 1964, he was actually talking about equity. Dr. King said it's one thing to sit at a table where you want to sit, it's another thing to own the restaurant. So he started to talk about equity. He talked about a universal basic income. He talked about owning land. He talked about equitable factors so that outcomes could be impacted. I want you to break down the difference between equality and equity.
So I think, first of all, I always say that when people say, well, what's the difference? You can always tell equity and the difference between equality when you look at the marginalized and you look at the wealthy. That right there tells you the clear difference between the two. The other part is when we ask for equity, and like you say, when you have that seat at the table, diversity can put you at the table, but the people around that table don't have to give you a voice. So what's the point? Diversity can bring you in, but if they're not going to give you equal pay, what's the point? You don't have equality. Equity will also get you places that equality can't get you. So I think that's important for people to recognize that there's a real clear distinction about having and then partially receiving.
I think that's well said. And we have been so confused about what equality is that we have accepted a model of equality that just is optically equal. That's it. The optics of it seem equal, but there's no actual outcome that's equal. The disparity is still present. So what has to happen for our Black sisters, our African-American sisters in America? What can I do as a man? What can this audience do as men and women? What can we do to help promote this agenda?
One, we have to speak up. Two, we have to advocate and not part-time advocate for it. I think that speaking up is one thing. This is why I decided to write books, not just to women, but for everyone. I've had, white women specifically and white men come to me and say, I want to read your book, but I'm not sure it's for me. And I always say the only way you can advocate for what Black people need is to be a part of the conversation, but understand what the conversation look like in order to give a voice, have a voice, and be a voice.
Very well said. Very well said. I believe that racism, bias, prejudice exist on a spectrum. And there are some people who can be helped, and there are some people who simply cannot be. And sometimes, especially with implicit bias, you're so unaware that if you are challenged through an experience, you can become aware. You can wake up from the slumber. How can people get access to your book and follow you?
So my books are really, all of them are available on Barnes and Nobles. You know, my book, I Am Not A Stereotype, I Am Her, is at Walmart, and as well as Books and Media and Barnes and Noble. It's available overseas as well. You can also get all of my books on my personal website, which is www.unapologeticbydrg.com. You can look at my website. You can also get them there, and they'll point you to it, which is www.iamdrpgurley.com.
Dr. Gurley, thank you for being on Indisputable. Thank you for the fight you continue every day.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.